In the next 30 minutes on the marketplace, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center is confident about foreign direct investment despite the scourge of COVID-19. Also, there are calls for opportunities for university graduates at labor-intensive industries to help nurture talent and facilitate the rapid economic growth. Plus, Tomato Farmers and Transporters Association calls on governments to implement a drafted framework immediately to coordinate trading activities. We have all these and more coming up shortly after this break. Hello once again, welcome to the program. I'm Charles Aite. The Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Yofi Grant, is optimistic that Ghana will attract more foreign direct investments. According to him, as companies try to recover from COVID-19, they will require resources in the process, and Africa has an attractive market. While speaking to Inshira Ado on Talking Business on Joy Prime, he revealed that the Ghana Beyond Aid initiative has made Ghana a more attractive market for investments.
The truth of the matter is that lives and livelihoods have to be sustained. And as the president says, this too shall pass. And it's better that people reposition themselves to take advantage of the opportunities that are created by the pandemic. And quite a number of significant opportunities have been created. But bear in mind, at the onset of the pandemic, many countries virtually started looking inwards. Monies that they should have used for, that could have been for investment, were used to sustain lives and livelihoods. And we did a fair bit. We even got some credit to support us. But if you look at the big economies, almost all of them had to borrow trillions and trillions of dollars to get their economies going. And that dried up a fair bit of the foreign direct investment. But the truth of the matter is the opportunities remain. The opportunities remain, and many economies are now having to retool and reboot. And in retooling and reboot, they do require the resources. They do require some repositioning and looking at markets which are attractive. And Africa, the African market, especially through the AFCFTA, has become much more attractive. And Ghana, because of our Ghana Beyond Aid mantra and our Ghana Beyond Aid strategy, has also become attractive as a destination for foreign direct investment, because we are looking for partnerships and linkages. And I believe that going forward, the world will focus on partnerships and linkages and just not look inward, because this is a pandemic that you cannot solve in just one country. It requires a very concerted communal effort to solve it. And so you realize that despite the fact that some countries have gone ahead to procure vaccines, etc., it's become clear that these vaccines should be available globally, because you can't solve the problem in one side of the world and leave the other side of the world.
Absolutely.
Having said that,
yeah,
a lot of economies will have to be reignited with trade. And the African opportunity cannot be discounted. In fact, it's the only real opportunity remaining, because a lot of Europe and America have been maxed out in terms of returns. Africa still will offer attractive returns. Africa still has a lot to offer in terms of value addition of its raw materials and resources. And that requires quite a number of investment. Indeed, over the past 10 years, if you look at the 10 top growing economies, 7 are from Africa.
That's absolutely true. Now, the director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Korte, has called on some labor-intensive industries, including the tourism and agro-processing sectors, to provide opportunities for university graduates to nurture their talent. According to him, this will help bridge the huge gap of unemployment as well as facilitate the rapid economic growth of the country.
You realize that youth unemployment is a major problem in this country. We are churning out more graduates from institutions of higher learning and other tertiary institutions, but we don't have the capacity to absorb them. And there's a youth unemployment bulge which has to be addressed. So the idea is basically some of this labor-intensive, identify some of the labor-intensive industries, find out what they are doing, what their potentials are, and how we can enhance their potential. So basically, the study focused on agro-processing and tourism, and that is where they collected data, analyzed, and very interesting findings were made. One is that these industries have potential for generating employment, for reducing youth unemployment. And then there's also the issue about the skills gap. There's a high skills gap which has to be addressed. And one will be for the industries to engage with training institutions, be it industrial attachment, etc., so that by the time they graduate, they will be ready for the market. They should also get involved in the curriculum development, so that whatever they are taught is in tune or in sync with industry requirements. Then also, issue about training is of trying to train and retrain our youth so that they can be skillful, because a skillful labor force is able to help an economy to be resilient in terms of shocks. So, for instance, when we had COVID, you could see some pharmaceutical industries and other sectors basically being able to manufacture PPEs and many other things. Same way we saw in the US, for instance, we saw IBM moving into manufacturing of ventilators and many other things. So we need to develop the skills so that they will be resilient.
Well, that was the director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Korte. Now to some pressing matters. The president of the Ghana Institution of Engineers, Leslie Alex Ayi, says the scrapping of the aviation ministry by President Akufo-Addo will have some dire financial and investment consequences for the country's aviation industry. On January 21, the president explained that some of the special purpose ministries under the president's first term, including the aviation ministry, have been realigned because they have indeed achieved the purposes for which they were created. Of course, but Engineer Alex Ayi says that the realignment of the aviation ministry into the Ministry of Transport could be counterproductive to the growth of the aviation industry. Let's get much more on this discussion as we bring in Sean Mendes. He's an aviation expert. He joins us via Zoom. So, Sean, we're grateful that you could join us at such a short notice. First of all, do we really need an aviation ministry, first of all?
Thanks for having me again, Charles. I think that's a good question to ask. The aviation ministry is actually a relatively new phenomenon in Ghana. If you recall, it was first introduced around 2005 or 2006 in the second Kufuor administration. And even since it was first introduced, it's been consolidated. Aviation has been consolidated under transport for a longer period than it actually has been independent. So I think there's, the history has shown that aviation has functioned both as an independent ministry as well as under transport. And as was explained, I think, when the president nominated the different ministers for the ministries, it depends on what the objectives are for the ministry in the upcoming administration. So I can see the benefits on both sides of that argument.
But of course, we're going to be bringing back the interview that Engineer Alex Ayi, had with us. But Sean, his main argument is that looking at the competition regarding the aviation space in Africa, having to scrap this particular ministry could pose dangerous threats to investment and trade patterns under the aviation space. Do you, sound this particular judgment?
No, on that argument, I definitely disagree with it. I think, if you look around the world, and in fact, even if you look around Africa, Ghana is among the smallest countries in the world to actually have had a dedicated aviation ministry. Much larger aviation sectors like the US, the EU, etc., just consolidate aviation as a subsector under transportation. And even in Africa, I mean, you can go to places, Nigeria being an exception, but South Africa has a transport ministry, Kenya has transport ministries and things like this. And all of these, are able to function by putting the right attention on aviation within a larger umbrella. And that may be something that, that Ghana may look at. A compromise may be to have a deputy minister focused on aviation under a larger umbrella like transport, or as under the office of the president or something similar. It would give aviation both the attention it would need as a sector to promote development, as well as a bigger tent for policy making and budget.
Interesting, but yet again, we're also having some experts raise concern about your own argument, especially when they're concerned about the single African air transport market, which, of course, till now hasn't been fully implemented. So that for us to have a special purpose vehicle under the signature of the Aviation Ministry could inject more intervention to Ghana's aviation space. Once again, do you agree to this dynamic?
You know, I think it's less important to have a separate ministry than it's to ensure that the expertise, the human resources who have gained the expertise in the aviation field, that is the civil servants, the directors of the ministries and so forth, that they continue to work under whichever ministry has the responsibility for aviation or wherever else. You know, it's not as though a ministry in itself is a magic solution to aviation issues. It is the people within the ministry, whether that's the minister themselves to bring the political power, or it's the technocrats and the bureaucrats themselves who are able to implement the policies and develop the policies. I don't necessarily see the ministry itself as the solution to it. If you're looking to shrink the size of government, which is something that the president has said is one of his objectives, the aviation ministry, consolidating it under transportation, would give it a natural home, and it becomes a logical move that could be taken. I don't think the aviation sector would suffer necessarily simply by consolidating it under transport. I think there's the potential for the right transport minister with the right people advising and assisting him to actually, you know, have access to larger budgets, to more clout, so to speak, politically, and be able to develop it both domestically, regionally, as well as internationally.
Well, Sean, even as we discuss matters regarding the aviation ministry, I would also want to draw your attention to this story of picking about the national carrier, which of course we're learning that will be some partnership with that of Egypt Air. Once again, we've had the president of the engineers organization object to this particular move, saying that it could cause matters of conflicts of interest. Where do you stand on this issue?
I think a national carrier is something that has limited utility to a country like Ghana, where the private sector has shown itself to be perfectly capable, in fact, probably better capable, judging on track records, of running airlines than than a government-owned entity has been. So I definitely agree. There are questions that need to be asked, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a national airline or an airline, which, from what I understand, from what the previous minister has said before, would be a government-backed airline, but not necessarily a government-owned airline, where a external strategic partner would actually be the ones running it. So I think the devil will be in the details. Certainly, I don't think there's prima facie the definitive need to have a national carrier, but I don't necessarily say that a national carrier would be a bad idea straight off the bat. We need to know the details of it, and to this point, as far as I'm aware, the details have not been forthcoming to the public.
Exactly, and speaking of details, we've also been scouting websites from Egypt Air in that regard, and we have specific news items that lay bare the fact that indeed we're going to be having Egypt Air as possible partners to this particular development. How do you respond to the matters of the conflict of interest? Because we're looking at an airline having to assist a country, have a national carrier. Where does the conflict of interest fall within this line of argument?
Well, there's definitely going to be some level of conflict. Whether that's acceptable to the government of Ghana or not is to be determined. Egypt Air itself is a government-owned airline. So while you may not be having, you may be saying that the government of Ghana will not be interfering in the airline's operations. If Egypt Air is your strategic partner, that means the government of Egypt is going to be calling the shots. Now, is that acceptable to Ghana? I don't know. That's something for the parliamentarians, for the elected representatives, for the ministers, for the president to make that determination. Egypt Air itself is in very dire financial conditions right now. They are in need of a government bailout to continue operating themselves. So even if there were to be a deal, it is not as though Ghana will be going into partnership with with someone who had all the resources. They would be dependent on the government of Egypt's handouts, effectively, to make this project run. So there are questions to be asked. I don't know the answers to it, but definitely I would be I would be interested to see the answers to those questions before I can either back it or say it's something that probably isn't going to work.
Well understood. Of course, we're also waiting to get more details into this development. Sean Mendes, we're grateful that he joined us. He's an aviation expert, helping us dissect matters regarding the aviation ministry, the scrapping of it, as well as the development story regarding that of the national carrier and partnerships we're hearing with that of Egypt Air. You're still watching The Marketplace. I'm Charles Ayete. We're going for a short break. When we come back, we tell you some of the plights that the Ghana Tomato Traders and Transporters Association is calling on government to deal with. Do stay tuned. Hello and welcome. The Ghana Tomato Traders and Transporters Association is calling on government to implement a drafted framework immediately to coordinate trading activities. According to the association's communications manager, Christian Latte, the framework would modernize activities of tomato trading, hence the process should be facilitated. Christian Latte further explained that the details of the framework while speaking with Emma Davis.
Ghana, Burkina Faso, there is an existing framework for tomato production. There was a study conducted by the International Food Policy and Research Institute that gives birth to that framework. The Ghana Embassy in Ouagadougou has done a very good job initiating that framework. I think what we need to do is follow up on that framework so that the trade can be modernized at all the levels, from farm gate through transport to marketing.
Can you enlighten us a bit about the framework?
The framework talks about standardization. It talks about packaging. It talks about an insurance program for producers, for buyers, for transporters. It also talks about a credit scheme that will ensure that people do not go on farm gates crediting tomatoes and absconding. That will also ensure that buyers have access to credit so that they can expand their businesses.
Now, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is expressing worry over the lack of participation of Ghanaian businesses in the Continental Free Trade Agreement area. It is against this backdrop that the Chamber is organizing a virtual seminar on the right strategies for local businesses to fully benefit from this pact. The Chief Executive of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mark Boachi, spoke to Joy Business ahead of the program slated for Wednesday.
We have to do more. The number of companies that have been able to export and after is relatively low, much lower than what we expected. And that is the main reason why we are organizing this. I mean, we need to do a lot more of sensitization, orientation for the business community to understand the after and how they can take full advantage of it. So I think we still have more to do in terms of how businesses in Ghana can take advantage of this after.
Okay, and I'm sure there are business owners watching and wonder whether or not they qualify to be a part of this seminar. So what businesses are you targeting? Small businesses, medium-scale enterprises, or the big ones?
Well, it's cut across whether you are big or whether you are small. You qualify to be part of this after and qualify to take advantage of it. But one thing we have realized is that awareness is very low among the SMEs. They don't seem to really understand what the after is, how they can take advantage of the after, the protocols, how they can get access to other markets, and how they can incorporate after activities into their strategies for 2021 and beyond. So basically, that is what we are doing on Wednesday to make sure that businesses really understand the protocols. The protocols are quite technical. And we are going to break it down into the more simplest form for an SME to understand, and also look at how they can take advantage of. You don't have to be so big a company or a business to take advantage of after. I think there is something for almost everybody, all businesses to take advantage of within the after.
Of course, it will be live on all our platforms tomorrow from the Shippers Council. Do stay tuned for that. But just before we leave, investment tips on Money Lab by the Executive Director of FLF Africa, Dr. Richmond Frimpong.
On Money Lab today, we continue with the understanding of what insurance is in simple terms. We've already explained that insurance is a safeguard against risk. In simple terms, it is saying that your insurance policy kicks in only when the bad event you are anticipating kicks in. If it doesn't, then you don't need to make any claim. Now, basically in Ghana, there are two basic or general terms. There is life and there is non-life. The life insurance borders on human life, and then the general borders on property or content or anything you have that you want to protect. So in the next time you are buying an insurance product, you should be able to tell if it is life or general. Life is about your life, general is about property or any other item. And when you do, you will be guided on what to know under each of them.